Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to be going through my tomato patch. I'm going to be trimming all my tomato plants. Let's get started. I might actually have to come in and put some support on the fruit itself because these get immensely heavy. Right, so that we don't get any blight, I'm going to go ahead and trim my tomato plants. Okay, as you can see, there's a lot of foliage going on, so what I'm going to do is trim it back. So any branches like this I'm just going to cut off. Do not cut off the fruit, obviously. Okay, so here you can see that this is the main stem running all the way down, but you can see that this is what we call a sucker or a clone, and it's coming out of the arm of this leaf here. So to ensure good circulation, I'm going to cut this off and I'm going to cut this off. As you can see here, I'm just going to be tying the tomato plant onto the cane. This is called growing them vertically or training them up a cane. This is to allow them not to trail all over the floor, and it minimises the risk of blight, and it allows more airflow to get through the plants even, because they become massive and tangled because they're vines. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. So I'm just tying them on with a bit of rope that I found around the allotment, but you can use garden twine, you can use basically anything, even little C-clips that you can buy that are designed for it. What I'm doing here also is I'm just trimming the suckers and the leaves. Anything that's below the fruiting level I'm going to be removing, because this will allow the sun to get to the fruit to ripen it quicker, because like I say, we actually have a frost coming up, so we have to be quite careful about how many fruit is growing, and it allows that airflow to move through. It reduces the amount of disease that these plants will be getting. So I've actually been growing tomatoes this way since I began doing tomatoes, because if they're touching the ground, then obviously they will get blight, etc. way more quickly. Normally though, I've already trimmed these up, trained them up, and when they get to the top of this stake, I'm going to go ahead and snap the tops off so they don't get any bigger. Yeah. You see how tall this golden sun is? So what I'm going to do is just snip out that growing tip because it is too tall. We only have, well, relatively speaking, we have quite a small growing season compared to some countries. Compared to others, we have a massive growing season. I don't know what I'm talking about, but compared to others, quite a small growing season. So I just go ahead, even with, I can't remember where I put my sucker toys, you see, you can just use, kitchen scissors is fine. They're not very strong. You could use your hands if you want to. But it will keep trying to grow down because it's a vine. And if it's a vine variety, it's all of these little hairs are going to turn into roots, and it wants to be on the floor so it can turn into roots. So you can see how much airflow I've sort of sorted myself out there. So you can see the difference between this one here and this one. This one is a bushing type. So due to this being a bush variety, I'm going to leave it as it is. You can't trim it because it will set a set amount of fruit and then it's going to stop growing. So unlike this, which will grow forever, okay, so these ones are going to grow forever. This one, it's going to set its fruit and then it's going to die back. So this is the Black Russian have one of my favourite varieties, by the way, but have amazing fruit here. They're huge, I mean super huge. On the plant itself, if you haven't done so, please consider subscribing, and if you comment, I do answer all my comments. So if you've got any suggestions or anything to say below, please go ahead and drop it down there and I will get back to you. As I'm watching myself tie this up, I just wanted to comment and say it is so important not to tie the strings too tightly, because obviously as the plant develops and grows, the stem will become thicker, so it is important to give it some wiggle room so that when the stem swells and gets larger, you don't have to go back and retie them all. I don't think I made that clear, so I thought I'd let you know. Also, it's super important that you don't remove all the leaves. I've done this before and it's never a good idea to remove all the leaves, although if you do, don't panic, because they will grow suckers, so you will get some leaves even if you cut them all off.
Alright, make sure not to cut this one because this is the growing point. But doesn't matter because we know it's a bush by the way that it is a vine by the way that it is growing. So we're going to treat it like any other vine variety. As soon as it ripens, I tend to know. I think it's Allotment, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm going to go ahead and tie it up. I like to use some of these like severed limbs to support my twine. Yeah. Right, so this other branch is getting a little bit much, so I'm just going to trim it, and where the last fruit is, I'm going to sever this part here. Going to tie it so it is up off the floor. This is going to help these fruit ripen. As soon as the fruit ripen, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this off.
I really struggle to cut off perfectly good fruit off of tomato plants when I'm trimming, even if it's the best for the plant, so I do tend to try to save as much of them as possible, and that's why it's so important to trim your tomato plants so early, because then you don't have the issue of not wanting to cut off developing fruit, because there's no developing fruit because the plant is so much smaller. But I didn't actually get round to trimming all of my tomato plants for the first time I did it because they were a little bit too small. Now, like I said, this is the style that I've always done. I've always done my tomato plants vertically and tied them up to poles, or sometimes I've even created like little trellises for them. However, I do know that some people have great success growing tomatoes on the ground. However, due to our climate being incredibly wet and rainy most of the time, we are currently in a drought, we do get quite bad blight. Last year we actually got very early blight. I mean, we've lost all of our tomatoes by this point. I think I only got a couple of tomatoes that were edible before the blight took the entire plant. So I am being a little bit paranoid this year, but I really love tomatoes and I love salsa, and I really want to get as much as possible. This is one of the reasons why I have planted so many plants, because we always get blight, always. However, we don't always get it so early, so I'm hoping to be able to have the tomatoes come into season and be able to have them, like a few harvests from them before the blight comes. I'm hoping that this year the blight won't come until October, because that's where our fogs start. I have a friend from Eastern Europe, and they said that in their country they believe that as soon as the frosts hit they get blight, and it is completely true. You get potato blight, and then because there's so much water and getting the leaves wet is a great way to spread blight. So like I said, I'm going to be training them to grow upwards away from the soil, and I'm not going to overhead water them, and I've also used the aspirin to hopefully kickstart their immunity to blight, so that when it does come they are slightly resistant. There are varieties that are blight resistant, but I've heard that they are not massively tasty, and I absolutely adore my heirlooms. I want, whenever I'm picking tomato varieties, I'm always thinking and to myself about my harvesting basket, and I don't want just solid red tomatoes. I want something interesting to bring to the table, because I mean, I'm working full time and I spend most of my time down here when I'm not at work, and it's hot, it's grueling, it's sweaty, I've got bugs crawling over me. I want something to, exciting that I'm fighting for at harvest time, not something that I can buy at Asda for about £1. So for me, that's my main motivation. These tomatoes varieties I'm actually never going to try unless I grow them myself. So that's pretty cool. And that's what makes me super excited about being a gardener and growing my own food is because I get to try a new food that I would never try without them being able to be grown myself. I also have some fantastic varieties that one of my friends has been growing on her parents' farm for about 50 years, and she gave me some plants to try, so I'm super excited about that as well.